Welcome back to Ruthless Metal. In today's video, we're going to talk about 10 albums that changed heavy metal. So these are 10 influential albums that nudged metal music in a new direction. And these albums were released between 1979 and 1990. So this is not a ranking video or anything, they are simply put in a chronological order. And don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe so we can get right into today's topic. So first out we have Motörhead's second studio album Overkill, a classic album in every sense of the word, and it was recorded in just 2 weeks at the Roundhouse Studios in London. And this album pushed the boundaries of music and inspired countless of bands in its wake. It was a giant leap from their 1977 debut album. Overkill was just a crucial album in the development of metal music. I mean, you can't find any mid-80s speed or thrash metal bands that weren't influenced by Motorhead, and this record in particular. And what would the new wave of British heavy metal movement have sounded like without an album like this? It's certainly hard to say. Just listen to the double bass drumming from Phil to Animal Taylor on the title track. It's just way ahead of its time. And let me prove that you didn't have to be an Ian Gillan or a Rob Halford to sing for a successful heavy metal band. And at the time the sound of Priest and Rainbow was what was popular, but Motorhead's Overkill nudged metal in a dirtier, faster and more powerful direction. Heck, even the punk kids enjoyed this one. Next. I could have chosen Killers or even The Number of the Beast here, but I went with Iron Maiden's debut here, simply because it was their first album, and Maiden blew people's minds when it came out. Prowler, Transylvania, Phantom of the Opera and Iron Maiden. There were so many great songs here that were played at a high tempo, while still remaining melodic and heavy. And there were other heavy bands coming through in 1980 in England like Diamond Head, Saxon, Angel Witch and Def Leppard, but Maiden's musicianship took their popularity and the influence to the next level. Those galloping guitars, the twin guitar attack, Steve Harris' excellent bass work, and Paul Di'Anno's vocals made the song sound punkish and punchy. Definitely a legendary and heavily influential album. Next up we have Venom with Welcome to Hell, and this album was the starting point for extreme metal. Thrash, black and even death metal wouldn't have been the same, or even exist without this record. The album cover alone scared both kids and their moms back in the day, and the music was faster, darker, heavier and more evil sounding than anything heard before it. But there has been some criticisms too about this record. Besides the satanic themes that Venom were sloppy musicians and so on, but I don't agree with that. Jeff Mantelstein, for example, was a brilliant guitarist, and Venom were incredible songwriters, there's no doubt about that. And very influential too. Just listen to Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, Creator, Sodom, Sepultura, Slayer, Bathory, etc. etc. They all drew influences from this beast of a record. And next up we have Metallica with Kill 'Em All. The world's first thrash metal record is of course a must on this list of albums that changed heavy metal music. Yeah, I think this is the first thrash metal record. Just listen to Whiplash or Metal Militia. There were nothing this fast or aggressive released before it. The razor sharp guitar tone, the riffs, the speed and the violence. Yeah, I love it. And over the years, Metallica grew bigger and bigger, and their influence did of course spread. Sure, there are some new wave of British heavy metal sounding riffs here and there, but overall, this album kicked off a new genre. So they definitely nudged metal in a new direction with this one. And next on our list is Bathory's 1984 debut album. Bathory's first record didn't have the same mainstream impact as some of the other albums on this list, but Bathory took the Venom sound and made it even more extreme in every possible way. Harder, faster, darker and even more lo-fi. And this album was a complete game changer, and I think it was the most extreme metal album from 1984. Only Hellhammer and possibly Slayer were even in the same region when it comes to how extreme this record was. If you look at Venom's early work, it was more in the speed metal vein with some black metal imagery. But Bathory's debut also had the sound that we now think of as black metal. So this album upped the standard for both black and extreme metal. Next on our list is also a Swedish band, or at least half Swedish, because it's Yngwie Malmsteen with his Rising Force. And after his time with Steeler and Alcatraz, Yngwie went solo and released Rising Force in 1984. Yngwie brought in some neoclassical elements to metal to a level unheard of before. Sure, Richie Blackmore had some of that in Rainbow, and Silver Mountain with Jens Johansson, Yngwie's keyboardist, experimented a bit with that stuff before joining Yngwie's band. So this was classical music played on an electric guitar, taken to a whole new level. And Yngwie was quickly hailed as one of the best guitarists of all time, and deservingly so, because you can hear his influence in a lot of power and symphonic metal bands, who often incorporated neoclassical elements into their music. And a lot of people probably just gave up their guitar ambitions when Yngwie stormed upon the scene, because it was just on an unreachable level right from the get-go. And this album was also unique because it was mostly an instrumental album, but still it managed to reach the 60th spot on the American Billboard's list. Next up on our list is Possessed with their 1985 debut album Seven Churches, and these guys were from the Bay Area of San Francisco, but their sound was so much more extreme than anything else that was going on around that area. I consider Seven Churches to be the first death metal record, even if there are some hints of thrash and black metal here too. For example, this album came out 2 years before Death came out with their Scream Bloody Gore album. And after that the death metal genre took off and became an underground force in the late 80s and into the 90s. And next on our list is Slayer with Rain in Blood, which was their third studio album and their first on Def Jam Records. Rap producer Rick Rubin produced this record, and he cleaned up Slayer's sound, while the band started writing faster and shorter songs. So Rain in Blood set a new standard that every other thrash band aspired to reach. Well, I also think that Rain in Blood also had a huge impact on the rise of the death metal genre that it took off in the late 80s. And in 1987, Helloween released Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1, and a year later Part 2 was released. These two albums were the starting point for the more melodic European style of power metal. Power metal had been around for years, but Helloween was quite different from the power metal style that was popular in the United States in the early to mid 80s. Music journalist Martin Popoff once said that Helloween was the first post-Iron Maiden band, and I think that was an interesting thought. I think that Helloween had some similarities to Maiden, but they were also very different. The Keeper of the Seven Keys albums shaped metal well into the 90s and beyond. Just listen to a random power metal album from the 90s and you'll hear the Helloween influence. And the final album here on our list is Pantera's Cowboys from Hell. This album is often hailed as the first screw metal album. And I think that this was a huge trendsetter, not a trend kill like how they saw themselves. The screaming tough guy vocals, which became even more prevalent on later Pantera records, but it's still here. And the guitar sounded more like a synthesizer than an electric guitar. You know, that's down-tuned guitar sound with the breakdowns and all of that. So in some sense, one could say that this was the first modern metal album. It just sounded and looked very different from anything that we've heard before. And this album and the following Pantera releases nudged metal in a new direction, and everyone from Sepultura to Machine Head followed. I personally thought that metal went off the rails here, but there is no denying that Pantera did set the tone for metal in the 90s. And that's the 10 albums that changed heavy metal from 1979 up until 1990. So let me know what you thought of these albums. Do you agree or disagree with my choices here? Let me know, or post an album that you thought changed metal in some sense. And if you enjoyed this video, then smash that like button. It always helps me out. and subscribe with the bell notifications turned on if you want more metal videos like this in your YouTube feed. And if you want to support my work, then you can go and check out the Ruthless metal store. It's listed down below, and I sell t-shirts, hoodies and mugs. And there is always the option to become a Patreon, like the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Your support is what keeps this channel going, so thanks for considering becoming a Patreon. And thanks for watching, stay heavy, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.